Welcome everyone to our July Council meeting. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this open council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The chair and or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. The stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view this live stream via our website at www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the stream, a recording will be made available on our website. Thank you. I will ask everyone to stand now, please, for our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Dja-Dja-Wurrung, Dja-Wurrung and Watchabaluk tribes, whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. Thank you. You may be seated. We have one apology tonight from Kathy Bramwell, and I now ask for any notice of disclosure of interest by councillors and or officers on any of the items this evening. There being none, we'll move on to the confirmation of the previous minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 9th of June and also the closed meeting of council. May I have a councillor prepared to move that? Thank you, Councillor Eason, and secondary Councillor Clark. All those in favour of those minutes? And they are carried. Thank you. We'll now move to the public participation item, and we have not received any questions and currently have no public here in the gallery. So I'll now move on, thank you, to the items for noting. So I will now, looking through those items of noting, the officer recommendation that the items for noting be received on page 29. May I have a councillor prepared to move those items for noting? Councillor Clark, and seconded Councillor Vance. All those in favour of those items, and they're carried. Nothing related to that there. Good, that takes us to item 13, which is our first item 13.1, which is our first item for decision, and that is the economic development response to COVID-19. And I'll hand over to Mr. Jim Nolan. Thank you to address that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report to you tonight is prepared by Ray Davies, the Manager of Economic Development and Tourism. And essentially it's to provide advice to Council about activities relating to the economic recovery associated with the COVID pandemic. The report provides some background to the pandemic, which stems back to the state of emergency that was declared by the Victorian Government on the 16th of March this year, where stage 3 restrictions were implemented from the 28th of March, and then the easing of the restrictions from the 22nd of June, subsequently the increase in infections in Melbourne and the movement of stage 3 restrictions more recently there into the Melbourne metropolitan area and Mitchell Shire. The report identifies that there's been significant impact on the tourism sector, particularly around cafes and hotels. The release of the Australian Taxation Office data advised that between the 30th of March and 26th of April, between 4 and 6% of employees with jobs in the Shire were on Commonwealth Job Seeker program. And it's noted that in media release today by the Australian Government that the Job Seeker program has been extended from September now for a further 6 months. The Bureau of Statistics report, in comparison to jobs identified in 2016 to current jobs, shows about approximately a 9% decline in employment, with the biggest impacts in retail and accommodation. In terms of the economic activity in response and support to business, in first instance, there's been a range of support provided by both state and Commonwealth governments, and part of Council's role is to actually ensure that our businesses have access and awareness of that level of support that's available. Council officers have made a number of phone calls to businesses within our community with a view to directing people to the support that's available through other tiers of government. Most businesses have experienced a downturn as a result of COVID, but there have been some pleasant surprises, and they're identified in the report. There's also been an impact through limits on mass gatherings and the ability to hold events. Communications with the community has been through e-newsletters and tourism newsletters, which provides information to government about government support programs. Also through Council's website, through social media and local papers, information has been disseminated to our business community. There's been a promotion of local businesses through a buy local campaign, particularly during April, where a number of participating businesses in that campaign. Furthermore, there's a tourism marketing strategy that has been developed to assist in the bringing the tourism sector through the COVID impact over the coming years. And that tourism strategy has been provided to Council, and there is a recommendation for that strategy to be endorsed tonight with a view to using that as a tool to assist in increasing visitor numbers in the future as restrictions are eased. There have been a number of infrastructure initiatives in response to assisting creation of jobs in the construction sector. The construction sector has been identified as an emerging and growing sector in our community, and from a council perspective, there are a number of council-led projects, some of which have been funded by other tiers of government, which will all go towards increasing the construction jobs available in our community. So things such as the investment in Corrie Park Estate, the government stimulus program, the Drought Communities program, and the additional infrastructure program that Council has planned for the coming year. Council has an application currently in the Working for Victoria Fund with the state government for the engagement of approximately 15 temporary staff over a 6-month period. This is an initiative of the Victorian government to provide opportunities for jobs where jobs have been lost as a result of COVID impact. The most significant impact on small business in our community has been the tourism sector. One of the initiatives that is proposed in this report moving forward by Council is to establish a COVID-19 economic task force. It is proposed that this task force consist of 2 council and up to 8 industry representatives from our community. The purpose of the task force is to coordinate economic recovery activities and support businesses in the Pyrenees Shire to manage their own recovery following the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. The philosophy behind this task force is that it actually seeks to enhance, to capture the business minds within our community to identify where the best opportunities for economic recovery lie, and to assist that group to enable those activities to be realised. Specifically, the role of the Economic Task Force group will be about coordinating activities to meet economic development needs, providing ongoing opportunities for participation and consultation with the business community, identifying and acting upon immediate priorities and emerging issues, gathering and disseminating information to the whole of the community, advocating for business community and their recovery efforts at local, regional and state level, providing specific and targeted feedback on a range of related issues to Council and other government bodies, and to provide additional mechanism for communicating information to the business community, and providing knowledge on local issues and initiatives to create ideas and solutions to assist in the recovery effort. It is intended that Council support this initiative and to enable better connectivity with our business community. So Council, these are some of the initiatives which form the cornerstone of an economic recovery. This is not a complete COVID recovery plan. A recovery plan is currently in development, but economic recovery is considered to be a significant element of our total COVID recovery plan once adopted. So it is intended, the Council is that, and recommended that Council formalise its support for the initiatives that are outlined in this report, and specifically a recommendation that Council endorses the establishment of an economic task force and endorses the tourism marketing strategy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nolan. It is so important. We are looking at this to support our local businesses. So I may ask a councillor now, please, to move a motion to that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Vance, and seconded Councillor Clark. And would you like to speak to that? Sorry, Councillor Vance first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no hesitation in supporting this recommendation from the officers. The Economic Task Force is a show of faith of Council in helping our people in the Shire get back on their feet. The sooner it happens, the better, I might add. This is one case where we need to get on the front foot and issue our support as quickly as we possibly can, because I'm sure that there are businesses and people out there that are suffering severe stress, and even if it's only somebody to talk through their situation, it will be of some assistance. The tourism marketing strategy is also extremely important, as we're well aware. The Pyrenees Shire rely heavily upon our tourism to our viticulture industry and our Pyrenees and Mount Cole area, and so I have no hesitation whatsoever in supporting this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, just to reiterate Councillor Vance's comments, there is a real need for that task force currently, and I think we as councillors would all accept that we have some willing hands in this organisation and some good minds, but the great minds that we've actually got are the people out there running the businesses, and they're the ones we need to get around the table, because they'll know the best way through this at the moment. We haven't tried the task force model before, and I would certainly think it's a great initiative, and it's probably got some greater applicability. I will certainly be watching it with interest in terms of what it does. And as Councillor Vance also said, the strategy we've got is very practical. It's one of the better, simpler documents that I've seen in my time. It's a really good bit to work from in that sense. But the real bottom line comes down to us all. We've all got to go out and shop a bit more local and keep doing that. So, yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well said, Councillor Clark. Councillor Farrar.
Perhaps just got a question. Are we aware of the time frame for the implementation of the Economic Task Force, considering the value it seems it's going to be to the municipality?
Thanks, Councillor Ferrari, for your question. This is intended to be a longer-term recovery. It's obviously there is an immediate need, and that need's not about to diminish in a short term. So it is a long-term initiative. However, it is something that can be enacted reasonably quickly, like within a month. We would expect that people can be co-opted into this committee. It is important for us to be transparent about it and to seek from the business community, appropriate representatives to participate in this task force that will actively dedicate some time and effort into representing the broader business community. So it's important to be transparent about it and to get the right people to the table, people with smart business minds that actually can really make a difference in identifying initiatives and actions moving forward. So we would expect that within a month we would have the committee up and running.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Further questions from anyone? Then we will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item 13.2, which are the Bendigo Bank footpath alterations, and I'll hand over please to Mr. Doug Gowans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement of a proposed change to the footpath outside 125 High Street, Avoca, in order to provide an all abilities access to the property. The building that currently houses the Bendigo Bank does not comply with current access guidelines. The two front steps limit access for people with mobility issues. The owner of the building has appointed an architect experienced in access compliance issues. The proposed works will not be funded by Council, but will go ahead only if supported by Council. 4 options have been considered. The first option was the provision of an access ramp and railings on the footpath at the building frontage. The second option was the provision of an access ramp and railings external within the property at a right-hand side, the north side of the building. The third option was to remove the stepped access and create internal ramps. And the fourth option was the raising of the footpath across the full length of the building frontage to include a new grassed area parallel to the highway. Although not subject to a formal planning application, the process has been treated similarly. Community members with comments have been asked to submit those to the planning team. A notification was placed in the Pyrenees Advocate and the project was advertised on Council's website and Facebook page. It was also displayed at the bank since the 1st of July. No submissions were received. However, Council is the public land manager for Avoca's footpaths and nature strips. Officers are seeking a Council decision on how to proceed with the works. The 4 options are detailed in the report. However, option 4, which is the raising of the footpath as proposed, could present some inconsistencies in appearance and ease of movement. There are 30 commercial premises in High Street and there may be expectations that this will be an acceptable way to approach all access issues. Of the 4 options, option 1 is considered unacceptable and options 2 and 3 are more favourable but also present practical difficulties that, if considered, outweigh the benefits of each. Option 4 represents an acceptable outcome given the specific circumstances of the site. Those circumstances include the heritage value of the building and its current fit out, which, given the security requirements of a commercial bank, need to be considered in any renovation work. Council will be responsible for maintaining the footpath should the proposed works go ahead. The footpath is already on Council's register, but the works will not be financed by Council. Council has the discretion to support works on land it manages where it can be demonstrated that those works will not harm the streetscape and will not set an undesirable precedent. It is concluded that the unique circumstances of this situation provide Council with the opportunity to reasonably exercise that discretion by endorsing option 4. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council endorse the proposed changes to the footpath as shown in the attachments to this report, and that Council authorise officers to ensure the project is delivered as per those attachments and to ensure any construction works are undertaken in line with Council specifications.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans, for that report. May I have a councillor to move a motion for that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Easton, and seconded Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Easton, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to move this report because I agree with the recommendation that of the 4 options placed before us, option 4 is by far the best. But I find option 4, as is represented here, will not be designated, what's the wording say? Will not be used for necessarily all options within the town. I think we as council need to get our act together and start looking at what those options may be for the other premises and get something that people can rely on from us as to how they may be able to improve their access throughout the town. One other comment I'd like to make is that the suggested ramp runs out to an existing grass nature strip. I would suggest that possibly because of the amount of traffic, the existing grass nature strip in the town is in a terrible condition, and this one will follow suit. So I might suggest that it all be concreted because of the amount of traffic that it currently takes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Ferrari. Other councillors, would anyone like to comment? Yes.
Well, just taking on board Councillor Easton's comments about the grassed area, I'm not sure that I don't, but agree with him, because if it gets much traffic on it, and we all know that it takes a bit of maintenance, and the bank staff have organised running the bank, they probably haven't got time to be gardening. I'm not sure whether they hire a gardener, but that should certainly be worth consideration, perhaps, maybe.
Would you like to respond?
Madam Mayor, thank you for the opportunity just to respond to that. The grass section that has been shown on the plans is in keeping with other frontages of the buildings, and there is some concern that the steepness of a concrete solution from the footpath to the edge of the curbing may not actually be compliant with the angles that the public would be traversing, whereas a grass solution would suggest that that's not the traversable component to be used. So I just put that forward as an issue.
Does that answer those?
No.
Would you like to respond to
No.
that? And if there's no, would you like to respond, Councillor?
No, I'll let them on the line because I thought I was more familiar with grass. Just another question, please, Mr. Gowans, if I could. Can you give me some sense of how we might, this is the first one that's come to council, and I know you've indicated in your report that created, can you give us some sense of how we might progress in the future, in simple terms, what council's options may be, please?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, these issues have obviously been in place for a very long time, and if there was an easy solution, it probably would have happened a long time ago. They're quite complex. We need to be thinking about the drainage implications, the other implications on neighbours, and there are, in this particular scenario, because of the side and the natural orientation of the gradient of the land, this solution is possible in this location. If frontages are smaller for businesses, by ramping up to a particular entrance may not be possible in some other entrances. So if council was to be looking at a universal solution, it's a very, very big project and comes with quite a number of complexities. As a standalone in this scenario, a solution has been put forward that works in this location. It may not work for all locations. In fact, as we've outlined in the report, where a solution can be done on site, that is absolutely council officers' preference.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Any other responses or comments on that? Then we'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you everyone for your contributions on that. That brings us to item 13.3, which is the Waste Transition Plan. And again, I'll ask Mr. Douglas Gowans to speak to that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council support to undertake a transition plan for waste and recycling services due to the proposed statewide changes in the sector. In February 2020, the Victorian Government announced significant reforms to household recycling. The reforms are proposed to ensure a viable and sustainable waste and recycling sector. The first stage of reforms will require councils to participate in transition planning. Effectively, the reforms require councils to provide a 4-bin model. These bins will include a separate collection of glass with a purple lidded bin by 2027, commingled recycling for paper, plastic and metals with a yellow lid, collection services for food organics and garden organics with a light green lid by 2030, and residual garbage collection with a red lid. The Victorian Government has committed to support councils to develop transition plans, implement the reform to collection systems, and support the reform with behaviour change programs. Council has access to funding and it will need to register our intent to develop transition plans and transition current council services to comply with the Victorian Government reforms by the end of July 2020. Prepare and submit a draft transition plan by the end of September, and also undertake community engagement by the end of March next year, and seek appropriate council approval of the proposed service changes prior to the submission of final plans. For curbside collections, council will not be required as part of this reform to standardise the colour of the bin body, the size of the bin provided, or the collection frequency. Timing will be informed by the needs of the community and to align with existing council contracts. It is envisaged the Pyrenees Shire Council will progress towards implementation of a household glass collection as part of the next curbside contract, which at this stage is scheduled for implementation from 1st of July 2021. It is officers' view that food organics needs further investigation and may need to be implemented beyond the next waste contract. Waste and recycling services are a core service of council and are reliant on the region and the state to ensure that there are markets for recycled materials and standardised service arrangements. Therefore, it is the officer recommendation that council supports council officers to prepare a transition plan for waste and recycling services.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. So that I will ask the councillor please to move a motion on that recommendation, and Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Ferrari, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it has to be recognised that the majority of these changes are initiated at state level. Council are required to adhere to these changes, and we just simply have to comply with the legislation. So there's been a bit of an ever-changing space, so we accept that at the council, mostly out of our control, but what I ask is for the community to be patient, work with the council in this ever-changing space so we can best deal with their waste in the most efficient way.
Thank you. Well said, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to follow on Councillor Ferrari's comment, I think it's a dynamic world, and then September seems like an eternity away. But certainly the concern that I would register in a public context is that of actually dealing with organics in a rural shire, where most of us actually have a capacity to deal with it because we either have a block big enough, or we have, in my case, a block's got 500 hectares, so there's plenty of space to deal with it. In that sense, Mr. Gowns, you highlighted the fact that it may well be another contract in that sense. So we do have, although we are doing a transition plan, we do have capacity within that to move with the technology and not overcommit ourselves within the next 2 months as the government would like us to do.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's correct, and in fact, the timing through the department's suggestion that glass has a closer time cut off, being 2027, compared to food organics, it does suggest that there is some more complexity in this area, and I think it would be in council's best interest to not rush into the food organics area, and part of the issue is making sure that the markets are there for this material. So potentially our community's already partly complied with the intention of the state model in that we have asked the community to remove glass from its recycled waste streams now. The issue will be the collection methodology, and we need to, as a council, ensure that our community is informed and also has the ability to be consulted on the best way forward.
Thank you, Mr. Downs, and thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Gowns, the only discussion I've heard on this has been around the fact that where the hell am I going to put a fourth bin? Not everyone has 400 or 500 acres to be able to hide something. I'm assuming it's all open for discussion, but I would expect that a fourth bin would be a similar size to the ones we currently have.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question, through you, Madam Chair. There are a number of factors at play here. Obviously, being a rural shire, in the majority, we have more space. Hopefully, households and units and small dwellings will be able to find the ability for a fourth bin. There are some concerns around what size that bin and what frequency that should be. Some of the factors that do come into play would include the weight of glass. If you had a 240 litre bin full of glass, there are some concerns in how the truck might be able to pick that up. So we need to ensure that we're providing a regular service for an appropriate size bin and that it has the ability to be housed at people's residences. And where that might not be the case, there may need to be some shared bin options considered for high density developments. Thankfully, we don't have too many of those at this stage, but I'm sure those options can be considered.
Thanks, Mr. Gowns. Councillor Vance.
It's interesting to note, and it's always been a talking point amongst our communities about container deposit scheme. So when we get to that stage of the process, we might find that the cans are going into it and the glass would be going separate into another container, not necessarily in a bin out in front of our house. So this is something else that you might wish to comment on, Mr. Gowns.
Thank you, Councillor, and through again, Madam Chair. It's a really, really good point. The state recycling strategy absolutely has a container deposit scheme as an implementation. I think it's beyond 2024. There's a little bit more work to happen in that space, but you're absolutely right. We will be having a changing waste environment and recycling environment, and I think it's fair to say that I'm really proud of the Pyrenees community in its response to being able to change, to take glass out of its recycling. I think we've had some really good results as a community. So I think our change to glass will be a really good one. I think as we go forward to potentially a container deposit scheme, our community will adapt again. And I think it's a really great sign of resilience in our community to be able to adapt to that change.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. Further comments or questions? And again, I'd like to second that too. I think that was well said, Mr. Gowns. We're very thankful to the community already for the changes that have come into place, and we thank you as you journey with us as these new transitions occur. So I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that's carried. Thank you very much for those contributions. That brings us to item 13.4, which is the adoption of the revised draft budget for 2021 and the rating strategy addendum 2020. And I will hand over to Mr. Jim Nolan for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to be able to present this report on behalf of Council tonight. The report's been prepared by our Finance Manager and would ordinarily be delivered by our Manager of Governance and Risk, who's unwell able to join us tonight. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement and adoption of the budget for 2020-2021 and the addendum to the rating strategy. Council, of course, is required to prepare an annual budget, which it did, and on the 14th of April, Council endorsed the draft for exhibition and community consultation. Following the exhibition period, Council received revaluation data from the valuer appointed by the Valuer General of Victoria, and that revaluation of land in the Pyrenees Shire identified a significant change in the value of farming property, when 23% increase when compared with a 15% average increase in value of land in the Pyrenees Shire. In response to that revaluation data, Council further considered the matter and decided to revise the rating strategy. And in doing so, sought to, at the June Council meeting, sought to republish the revised draft budget and the rating strategy and place them both on public exhibition. The revised rating strategy saw a change to the general or the addendum to the rating strategy, changed the differential for farming properties to 74% of the general rate in response to the increased valuation of farming land. The purpose of this essentially is to redistribute the increased rating burden more evenly across all rating assessments. And in doing so, it would see approximately 50% of the total rate revenue raised by Council obtained from the farming sector. In response to the initial exhibition of the budget, the Council received one submission from the Victorian Farmers Federation, and Council subsequently met with the President of the VFF in respect to that submission, and essentially that submission was supportive of Council's position to consider the impact of rates and rating system on the farming sector. In respect to the further consultation period, which extended from the 10th of June to the 10th of July, public notification was given and access to the documents were available on Council's website, hard copies provided at various Council facilities. No additional public submissions were received during this additional consultation period. So in respect of the budget itself, the budget represents a $23 million expenditure budget. It incorporates a rate increase of 2%. It proposes no new borrowings and incorporates a $7 million capital works program. That capital works program includes approximately $4.5 million invested into our road and bridge infrastructure network. It also incorporates a $1 million drought communities program to provide stimulus to those communities affected by drought. It also provides for a waste management service that is fully funded by a waste service and use charge, of which the proposed garbage and recycling service charge is for urban areas $436 per annum, and for improved and unimproved properties a waste facilities disposal charge of $276. Some of the other sort of key elements of this particular budget is that it's identified that it is a budget in a rate capping environment, which puts constraints on Council in terms of its capacity to raise revenue. It also highlights the importance of maintaining and renewing our road infrastructure network, which is a fundamental priority of Council's plan. It doesn't amend our current service standards, so it maintains those service standards. It also responds to the impact of COVID-19 on our communities and provides for provision in respect of responding to those impacts. So, without further ado, councillors, I commend to you this budget and the revised rating strategy. There is an officer recommendation there which is quite lengthy. I won't read it word for word, but in summary, it does include a recommendation to adopt the 2020-21 budget prepared as exhibited, to adopt the rating strategy addendum, to authorise the Chief Executive to give notice of the decision. It also provides that the budget includes no new borrowings. It also provides for the setting of the rate in the dollar, as outlined in the table in front of you. It provides for a waste facilities disposal charge of $276 for improved properties and unimproved properties. It provides for a waste collection service charge of $436 on urban properties at Beaufort and Avoca, and also a charge of $436 for other urban townships and rural areas that receive a garbage and recycling service. It proposes that the rates be charged in instalments as outlined in the report, and it authorises the Chief Executive to levy and recover the general rates and annual service charges in accordance with the Act. So that's the summary of the recommendation, Madam Mayor, and I put that to you and commend this report to Council.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. That was a lengthy one, but thank you so much for going through that. So I will now ask the councillor to move a motion to that recommendation, and I think Councillor Clark will move that, seconded by Councillor Vance. Thank you so much. And Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've had my book here. I think it's important that we are responsive, and we have been responsive this time in terms of the way things move. And I think we've ended up with a really good budget in the context of what we wanted to do. I'd like to make my thanks to the key staff involved with this. I'm sure underneath there was a bit of oh gosh, this is a heap of work, but everyone has done it without any and done it in a really timely manner, so council's been able to consider it. So that's really important in that thing. I don't think we should skip over the positives. We've got a significant amount of income coming in from a new wind farm. That is a real boost to a little council like us. We don't get those kind of gifts very often in terms of revenue. That'll be a terrific boost for us in 2021. As Mr. Nolan said, we're spending $7 million on capital works. Put with that another 2.7 we're spending on road maintenance. That's basically 44% of our budget. 44 cents in every dollar that we get goes on roads, and that's what this council's about. So that's really important that we continue to do that, I think, in the sense of those things. I think the rating strategy has been, again, a challenge in that sense, and I think we will redo that with the new council, so that'll be a chance for us to look at maybe something that's a little bit more dynamic for us to deal with that in the future. I did have one question relating to the fees that we charge in terms of councils, and I understand the fees and very happy to approve the fees that we have, but is it possible to, at a future council meeting, get a report on just how we actually apply those fees and what discretions council has at council or council officers have available to them, Mr. Nolan? Would that be possible?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Very happy to bring a further report to Council about the application of fees across the board, so that Council can consider how they're applied.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillor Vance, would you like to say?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd also like to commend the staff for the efforts that they've put in, and also my co-councillors. We're living in a time where, for the last 20 years, everybody's income has been on the up, everything's been on the up, and all of a sudden we've hit a brick wall with a thing called COVID-19. And it should be noted that council do respond to submissions when they're put to us, and We had a very informative session with the chair of the VFF, and it's got to be understood for those people that are not owners of farming land, that when the valuation of your property can go up by as much as 50% in some cases south of the highway, it adds a terrific load onto those people to meet it with their rates. And when you're in a downturn such as we're facing at the moment, we don't know what the future holds, but at least council sat around the table and we discussed this at great length, and we did respond to the submission. So for those people that sometimes sit back and think, I'm not happy with this, always be game enough to put pen to paper and respond through the way of a submission, because we do consider it. The charges that are levied for waste collection are only break even. They're not something that council makes a profit out of. So we run a very tight ship, and I'm very proud of the fact that we can run that ship without any debt at this stage, at least in the current situation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Other councillors, Councillor Edison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to reiterate comments of both councillors, most important being the work of the staff. This is our major document for the year. It gives us the money to do the things that we want to do for our shire. Without that work in the background that goes along, we don't come up with this document today. We've done some tinkering with it. They've gone ahead and redone the document, put it out for public discussion, and we got one response. In discussions earlier today, one comment was passed that we go out and ask for responses and we get 2 or 3 people turn up. It's the way the system works. If people are unhappy with what we're doing, they need to, as Councillor Vance said, put pen to paper and let us know. That's why we ask for their opinion. We value it. Mr. Nolan, I'm confused with just one bit of the report. In the budget overview, the first paragraph, the budget includes a rate increase of 2%, being the rate cap set by the Minister. Council resolved in late 2019 not to apply for a rate cap increase in 2021. Am I right in believing that they are incompatible together? The way I read that, it includes a rate rise, but we didn't apply for one.
Yeah. There's an opportunity for council to apply for a variation to the rate cap, which is a higher amount of rate cap, and council chose not to apply for a higher cap above the rate was set by the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan.
Any further comments or questions? Thank you, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just also like to add my bit and thank the staff for the tireless work on the budget, which through necessity had to be a very fluid document, and also reiterate what Councillor Vance said, that we had many in-depth discussions about it, and we applied the only mechanisms we could to make sure that those amounts payable were fair and equitable right across the whole balance of the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Further responses? I'd like to second what everyone has said, and that it does take time, but we're definitely wanting a very fair and equitable budget, and it is a great responsibility, the stewardship of the budget, but thank you again for everyone's contribution and time and the offices they've put into that. So now I will ask for a vote on the motion. All those in favour, and that is carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 13.5, which is the road renaming NP36 on Mountain View Road at Moonambell, and I will hand over to Mr. Jim Nolan. Thank you for that item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report relates to Mountain View Road, north of Moonambell, and the proposal is to remove some of the confusion with current road naming and property addressing. It is proposed to rename section of Mountain View Road to Goddard Lane, and this report sets out the various process there and the reasoning behind the name. It is essentially commencing a process to name, and that requires a resolution from council to consult the community for those affected by the renaming. So there is a map there that outlines where the change is proposed, and the recommendation from the officers is that council commences the process to rename section of Mount View Road as Goddard Lane, seeks approval from GeoNames to proceed with the use of the name Goddard Lane, gives public notice of the proposed renaming and asks for public submissions in accordance with section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989, and writes to affected landowners advising of the road naming proposal and the invitation for public submissions.
Thank you very much. May I ask, thank you, Councillor Vance, is moving that, and seconded Councillor Easton. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is purely a procedural matter really, for the ease of statutory authorities finding access to those one or two properties on the end of this lane. It avoids any confusion, I believe, and it is a necessity to happen. I don't remember crossing paths with Mr Goddard or any of his descendants. I'm sure there may be some around, but it's purely a procedural matter.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Easton, did you want to speak? Any other councillors? If that being the case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 13.6, which is the outstanding rates as at the 30th of June 2020. And again, I hand to Mr Jim Nolan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's customary for council to actually report on the collection of rate revenue, and this report identifies that there is just over $500,000 in rates arrears as at the June 2020, which represents about 4.86% of rates raised that are in arrears. Of that, hardship provision has been assigned to approximately 11 assessments in respect to array. 8 of those relate to the Lexington Bend major fires that occurred in December 2019, and 3 are in response to COVID-19. And Council has previously resolved to provide hardship provisions within its revenue collection, and as such, no legal action has been taken in respect of recovering those amounts with a view to recouping those in due course. The officer's recommendation is the council receives the rate arrears report as at 30th June 2020 and requests regular reports be provided to council with details of the rate arrears.
Thank you, Mr Nolan, and I'm looking for a councillor. Thank you. Move that. Thank you, Councillor Clark, and seconded Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for this report, Mr Nolan. It's always good to know where we're at with the money, and good to see that most of our people do pay. I'm just looking at the notes, and it says that we've really only got 0.3 of 1% that we basically can't sort at this point in time, and that's a pretty good result for council and that kind of things. The one thing I can't determine from the report is just kind of a sense of whether some of these amounts go back beyond previous years, Mr Nolan. Is it possible that we could just get something circulated to councillors about that out of session? It doesn't have to be, a council meeting per se, just to get something done.
Happy to do that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And Councillor Easton, other councillors? No, if that being the case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that motion is carried. We'll now move to item 13.7, which is the Community Satisfaction Survey. And again, I will hand to Mr Jim Nolan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Each year, Local Government Victoria coordinates and auspices a statewide local government community satisfaction survey throughout Victoria of all local government areas. Participation in the survey is optional, and participating councils have a range of choices as to the content of the questionnaire and the sample size to be surveyed, depending on their individual strategic, financial and other considerations. In 2020, 62 of the 79 Victorian councils participated in the survey, including Pyrenees. The main objective of the survey are to assess the performance of Pyrenees Shire Council across a range of measures and to seek insight into ways to provide improved or more effective service delivery. The survey also provides councils with a means to fulfil some of their statutory reporting requirements to the community, as well as acting as feedback mechanism to local government Victoria. So in the Pyrenees, there are approximately 400 interviews connected by telephone between 30th of January and the 22nd of March this year. In compiling the data, the report that is provided to council compares Pyrenees performance with 16 other small rural councils as listed in the report. The results are also contained in the report, and it is intended that a copy of the full report be provided on the council website, and it will also be available on my council website. A summary of council's performance is outlined in the table provided. There are a couple of observations that are made and highlighted within the body of the report. In comparison to state area groupings, the report provides the council is rated in line with the small rural average across most individual service areas, significantly higher on overall performance. However, it performs below the average in respect of appearance of public areas, elderly support, waste management. And I highlight a couple of the areas of concern, including waste management, road maintenance, and building and cleaning permits. These are matters that have been discussed by council in some depth through workshopping and taking on board some of the specific comments by the participants in the survey. So it is important for council to consider this feedback and use that feedback in its future service delivery in terms of how we deliver services to the community and also how we consult and engage with the community. So it is recommended council that council receive the 2020 Community Satisfaction Survey report. The council uses the relevant data in the report when considering alterations and future improvement to services and places the survey report on council's website.
Thank you, Mr Jim Nolan. So may I ask for a councillor to move that motion, and that's Councillor Ferrari is moving that, seconded Councillor Eason. Councillor Ferrari, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as I'm aware, all the councils have gone through and we've noted some of those comments. We've still got a bit of work to do there that's fairly involved. I think something that's really important is that we're about the state average for the small councils and the others that we're compared with, so that's first thing. And the recommendation, I think it's really important that we do use that data and understand the data, not just use it but understand it, so how we can move forward and making improvements. I think it's important that we share this survey with all employees and contractors of the council, because they all have the ability to influence a positive change if that's what's required. And I think something that's really, really important and that perhaps gets highlighted a bit throughout that survey is that we continue to listen to the community and provide relevant and timely feedback to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Eason, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I made a comment earlier on the budget report of how we go out and seek people's opinions and people's ideas. Here's one that comes to us because we go out there and we ring them and we get them at home, and we need 400 odd responses. We have to make a hell of a lot more to get to the 400 mark, but we do it, and again it shows that we are out there trying to find out what people want us to do, what people think of us, and how much or what we can do better to provide for them.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Other councillors, would you like to speak? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I just raised a couple of things. I think there's a couple that have jumped out at me particularly, and I think we've already talked waste management a little bit with Mr Gowans earlier, and there's an issue there that we'll work our way through. But the one that particularly jumps out to me in terms of the councillors planning and building, and if you look at, I'm looking at page 19 of the report, and it says that 26% of the people surveyed couldn't offer an opinion, which is fair enough. But 25% thought we were in the middle. Only 20% thought we were doing good or very good, and 30% thought we were doing poorly or very poorly. And this is the second year in a row we've had a bit of a kind of a slip in this area. So again, I would certainly be keen for councillors to have the opportunity to have a bit more of a discussion in depth about those things and what they might be, Mr. Nolan, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just in response to that, Councillor Clark, very happy to seek our Manager of Regulatory Services to bring a report back on this and to provide opportunity at a briefing for councillors to discuss some of the relevant issues and some of the specific feedback on this to see how it perhaps can be approached in a different way and how we can look to service particularly our business community and those that are seeking to develop in the Pyrenees Shire, to see it as a place where they can expect a service that is professional and efficient and effective.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillor Mayor. Thank you so much for those contributions, and we thank the public who have participated in that survey as well, because that gives us, as Councillor Ferrari mentioned, gives us that data to be able to look at and really understand and look at areas to continue to improve at all times and to know what is working well. So thank you. So I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that's carried. Thank you all. That brings us to item 13.8, which is the Reconciliation Action Plan, an update on the registered Aboriginal parties. Again, I will hand to Mr. Jim Nolan. Thank you to address us on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report, councillors, is to consider how we recognise the traditional owner groups that form the Pyrenees Shire. And there has been some change in the expectations about how these traditional owner groups be recognised. And this issue has been highlighted through the activities of our Reconciliation Action Plan Working Committee. Specifically, there is a map that forms part of this report that sets out the various traditional owner groups which are represented by the registered Aboriginal parties in the Pyrenees Shire. Specifically, the pink area in the map represents the Wathaurong traditional owner group, registered Aboriginal party. To the northeast, the green section represents the area of the Jaja communities. The white slither within the Pyrenees Shire there is an area that's identified as not being represented by any particular registered Aboriginal party. The area to the west of the Shire in the purple on the map represents the area that is represented by the Eastern Maar people. Now, the Eastern Maar has only recently been registered as a RAP. Previously, within the Pyrenees Shire, we have recognised the Japarong people. The Japarong were previously represented by the Martang registered Aboriginal RAP. Martang has been deregistered as such, and the Eastern Maar has now been registered and recognised as the appropriate authority for representing the Eastern Maar party peoples. In addition to that, there's a small slither of land to the northeast of the Shire, which is represented by the Pyrenees Shire Land Council as the registered Aboriginal party. Now, the Pyrenees Shire effectively represents the nations of a number of traditional owner nations, including the Watchabollop, who was recognised at the start of this council meeting, as well as a number of others, including the Jawajali nations. So it is intended, councillors, that we give consideration to looking to ensure that we represent and acknowledge our traditional owner, First Nations people, in the most appropriate way. So this has been subject to some research by the group, and it is expected there's been further research undertaken. But there is a recommendation, Council, that Council notes the inclusion of the Eastern Mar peoples and undertakes further research in respect of the Wotjopolik, Jawajali, Workyar, Jawagak nations, with a view to including these in future council publications where appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. May I have a councillor willing to move that? Thank you, Councillor Eason, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Eason?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The process of the RAP system gives us an understanding of the original owners of the land where we meet. These people had it a lot longer than we have and have a lot probably to offer us with regards to knowledge of the area and knowledge of their history. At one stage this afternoon I was outside looking at the totem in our foyer that was provided to us about 12 months ago at a smoking ceremony down by the lake. And I was present at that function with the Mayor, and it gave us some insight into what they used to do when they met someone from one of the other tribes. There's probably an awful lot of information that I haven't got, and Mr. Nolan, I don't want to create a workload of any significant amount, but if these groups of people have documents about their history and about their stewardship of the land readily available, I would like to have a look at it if it's possible, just because I think it's better for us to have a better understanding of their ownership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Yes, thank you, Mr.
I'm happy to respond to that, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Eason for that request. The Reconciliation Action Plan that's been endorsed by Council does include an action for Council to undertake cultural awareness training, and part of that cultural awareness training is to enable our staff and councillors to form a deeper understanding of our culture of the First Nations people. We actually have committed to undertake some of that training in the coming months with our staff, and be very happy to actually provide some of that training to councillors as well in the form of a council briefing on the matters that you've raised.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak? Others? No, that would be very interesting too, and it is such an important thing that we're able to recognise those traditional owners, and the cultural awareness training is a great aspect of that too, so that would be very interesting. Thank you. So we'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. That brings us to item 13.9, which is the COVID-19 Community Survey Summary, and Mr. Jim Nolan will be presenting on behalf of Laura Buchanan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In June of this year, Council undertook a survey of the community to better understand how the COVID pandemic was impacting on the residents of the Pyrenees Shire. Approximately 81 respondents were received to the survey, and this report outlines some of that feedback that we've received from our respondents. According to the respondents, there's been a small but noticeable impact on the employment of respondents. Officially, Official numbers from the ABS indicate that 256 jobs have been lost across the municipality. Respondents were asked the question, how were you mainly feeling at the height of the COVID-19 restrictions? And essentially the feelings of the community were 34% were worried, 21% were understanding of the restrictions, 9% were relaxed, 6% angry and 6% frustrated. Top 3 responses to the question, what has been your biggest concern since COVID-19 restrictions have been in place? The biggest concern has been the welfare of older, more vulnerable members of the community. Approximately 19% of people were concerned about that. The uncertainty about the future and the concern about contracting the virus, which 15% were concerned. Question of what has been your biggest concern since COVID restrictions have been in place, so the concerns were the welfare of vulnerable members of the community, contracting the virus, uncertainty about the future. There were also 9 responses in other, indicating there were a number of other secondary concerns and concern about second wave of infections. The top 3 labelled responses to what are you most looking forward to as COVID restrictions are eased. Visiting family and friends was the highest ranked, and outdoor recreation activities, attending local businesses were the key responses there. The top 3 labelled responses to the question, have you experienced any benefits resulting from the introduction of COVID? Undertaking home garden improvements, spending time with family, working from home were among the key respondents. I think the information is relevant to now being able to feed into our recovery and relief program, and there is a recommendation that Council notes the Pyrenees COVID-19 Community Survey Summary Report and uses this feedback to inform future relief and recovery planning for the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan, and there's lots of good data there too to help us to support our community through this time and into the future, so we thank you for that. May I ask the Councillor happy to move that? That's Councillor Vance moving that, and seconded Councillor Eason. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak to the survey result?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. COVID-19 is something that mankind hasn't experienced before. I guess if we make a comparison, it's not really a comparison, but perhaps the Black Plague, the Great Plague back in 1919 might be a comparison. We live in times that are totally different to those days, of course. The one thing that I've learned is that I miss seeing family, especially your grandchildren. That's something that really hits to the core when you can talk on the phone. I realise we're fortunate we can possibly do that, but to have actually miss out on the physical contact is something that weighs pretty heavily with me, and I wonder, knowing the lifestyle that we've got used to, how we're going to react after this dreaded beast disappears. It's not showing any signs of disappearing in Victoria at the moment. That's something that we're well aware of. We've been very fortunate in the Pyrenees Shire that we've been spared any real grief other than the fact that we are restricted where we can go and what we can do. One thing that does come home to me is that the bank account has probably had a bit of a spell at the expense of the people who provide our entertainment. We don't seem to have the opportunity to go and enjoy meals with our friends or go to the wineries or spend money, so that comes at the expense of our business houses that supply all these pleasures that we've been used to. One would hope that we could get back to somewhere where we were before, but surely we must be wise enough to learn by the experience that we're going through now. One would hope so. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Councillors, no? Other councillors? No, so we thank you. Again, we thank everyone who's put the effort into this report. And I think there are very wise words in saying that there is a lot that people are going through, and there's many people helping each other as well. So we're thankful for that. But we will get through this together, and hopefully it will disappear sooner than later. So I now ask all those in favour of that to vote, and everyone voted there. Thank you. So that's passed. That brings us now to item 13.10, which is Corrier Park in Beaufort. And I will ask again Mr. Jim Nolan, please, to speak to that report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council considered a report on Corrier Park at the Ordinary Council meeting in May 2019 and resolved to seek a further report on the matter to come to Council for consideration once the cost of development at stages 4 and 5 are known. A copy of the relevant section of the officer's report is copied here for Council background. And essentially that report was presented to Council at the time in response to a petition from the community seeking that one of the lots in stage 3, that is lot 5, 7 Acacia Court, Beaufort, be set aside for public open space purposes. Council considered that and resolved at the time to delay the decision for Council to consider the status of and possible naming of lot 5 Acacia Court Beaufort until stages 4 and 5 development costs are confirmed, following a formal tender process for the construction, and requested a further report on the matter to come to Council. At a special meeting of Council in April of this year, Council awarded the civil works contract for stages 4 and 5, and works are currently well advanced and anticipated to be completed in the 4th quarter of this year. The civil works, the land purchase, and a range of other costs associated with bringing together a development such as stage 4 and 5 at Corrier Park to create 39 lots also includes such costs as fencing, survey design, project management, legal, marketing fees and other miscellaneous items. The estimated cost, having regard to the contract that's been awarded and the land purchase and these other costs, is in the order of $2.75 million, representing approximately $70,000 per lot for the 39 lots that are to be created. Marketing and sale of the lots is anticipated to commence in the second half of this year, subject to the progress on civil works construction. Demand for residential land is currently very strong, and it is anticipated that that is in response to, in part, the federal government's stimulus funding for housing development, as well as increased population growth and the cost of development in highly developed regional cities. So the matter for Council consideration is whether the lot 5 Acacia Court should in fact be set aside for public open space, or whether it should be utilised for residential development. Relevant factors to consider in respect of the Council's decision include the loss of sale revenue of that lot, which was originally set aside for residential development. It was originally estimated in value at $68,000, and that was 2018, I think. The ongoing cost of management and maintenance of the area, including mowing, tree management, fencing renewal. Anticipated other future recreational cost expectations. The loss of suitable residential development on the lot. Potential loss of native vegetation on the lot if sold for housing construction. whether there's a need for additional open space within Corrie Park Estate, given that council has previously approved the subdivision design and planning application. It also takes into account the fact that that council is required to comply with a range of design criteria and the provision of public open space, and this is a requirement of the Pyrenees Planning Scheme and the Subdivision Act collectively. The Act provides that council has discretion to determine whether the contribution of public open space be provided as land, the financial value of that land, or a combination of the two. In the matter of Corrie Park, council determined at the time the subdivision was approved for the planning permit for the subdivision to invest the financial value of the land into existing public open space in Beaufort. This decision was made to encourage Corrie Park residents to not become detached from the broader Beaufort community, and that by investing the financial equivalent in existing infrastructure, the benefit would be felt by all. The subdivision of the design of the estates also provides for generous lot sizes in a range of 700 to 1200 square metres generally, when compared with many other residential subdivision developments which have lot sizes in the order of 500 to 600 square metres, and thereby providing more garden space within private allotments. The provision of connectivity by road and walking paths of the estate to public spaces in Beaufort. If council decides to support the request by the residents for the lot to be made into public open space reserve, council may wish to consider the second part of the request, and that being the naming of the area. So, in conclusion, councillors, the recommendation is that council, having regard to the demand for suitable residential land in Beaufort, determines that the need for additional public open space in Corrie Park has not been established, and agrees that Lot 5, 7 Acacia Court be offered for sale in conjunction with the sale of land in stages 4 and 5.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. And do I have a councillor that is willing to move that motion? Thank you. Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Easton. Thank you very much. And on that, Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a fairly detailed report. I think my understanding, firstly, if I could ask a question, is the two areas of existing open space, I assume, haven't been developed, but do they have capacity to be developed into recreation areas for the use of the residents of Corrie Park?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Clark. The area to the northwest of the estate is essentially an area for drainage retention, but it is essentially maintained in a very natural state. It can be developed into a higher amenity area with works. Council hasn't set aside any of the funds from Corrie Park to actually to do that, but it could be improved as such. The area to the southeast corner, which is contained in Lot 4, Stage 4 of the estate, also has an open space area which is about equivalent of one large lot size, so in the order of about 12,000 square metres, 1,200 square metres. And that is essentially a retarding basin for stormwater discharge when there are peak storms to take the peak off the water flow. It is an area that can be maintained in a grass condition and could be landscaped and made attractive for public amenity. So they're the two areas that have been sort of set aside essentially for drainage and stormwater management purposes that can to some extent be improved for public open space and amenity purposes.
Thank you. I certainly think the original plan we had of actually keeping the Corrie Park connected to this community is really important in this sense, and the open space that we've got there, there's capacity to develop that better. I think that's a really logical process to take. To me at the moment, given the council given a commitment to this community to purchase the former oval of the former primary school site, and again, that is not finalised yet, but if we have to spend some money to purchase it and we have to actually invest in it, which we will have to turn it into good public open space, that figure of $68,000 or $80,000 or whatever it may well be for that block, I think would be really, really good start for council in that sense. So, in my view, I think the best use of the funds is that this block is sold and those funds are spent within the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to suggest a different point of view to Councillor Clark. In my youth, in growing up in a residential area, I found having a footy oval at the end of the street very, very enjoyable. Get away from the house. I didn't have to go very far. And Mum could find me if she needed me. And I think a similar sort of operation is what prompted this petition that came to council. I think the open space discussion that's gone on has probably given me a better understanding of the Correa Park people, and I would be supportive of that area on 7 Acacia Court being used as public space, and would be happy to move a motion if I could get a seconder.
You need an amendment to the motion?
An
There is a
amendment.
motion. Yeah, you need to do an amendment.
So you've got a seconder to amend the motion.
No, having seconded the motion, is he able to move an amendment to the motion?
It's a good point.
The point of order, Madam Mayor, you're not allowed to move an amendment that is in direct contradiction of the motion. The motion needs to be put to the vote.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
So we will deal with the first motion and then we can bring the other motion.
That's another one. Yeah.
Do you have further comment on it first?
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
please, on the first motion, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can certainly say in confidence that the residents of Correa Park are very much in favour of retaining this area as a recreation area. So that's really, really important. If we're saying we want to listen to the community, well, that's the first thing that I'd like to point out. The proximity to other recreational areas tend to be a considerable distance away now. I mean, we are in a rural area, we know those distances, we accept those a bit. But I do feel for those residents that a local area would be much more efficient for them, and particularly in safety aspects in relation to smaller children, where some of those concerns are significantly addressed if it's retained in the local area. People with mobility issues, so we would like to give them the opportunity to go somewhere close and local. I'm not convinced that we do have some nice other areas, but I'm not convinced that those people would be able to take up that opportunity. The people with differing mobility issues would be able to take up those opportunities if we were to not retain this area. When we discuss about developing our communities, I think it's important that we keep our developments attractive and to provide an open green space when and where we can, that adds to that attractiveness and that aesthetic feel of the area. As I mentioned before, I wouldn't like to see any of our development areas become a concrete jungle, and we might think that now, but we've got to think about 10 or 20 years ahead. So, you know, we're going to have around about 100 houses up there when this next stages are completed. So I'm sure that I'm confident it requires a dedicated recreation area. The estimated maintenance regime is quoted as around $2,000 a year, so I don't think that's too onerous to have a nice, lovely park local for those Correa Park. The other nominated areas that have been mentioned in that area are subject to flooding, so that really rings some alarm bells for me in relation to safety, especially with children, access, all those sort of things. So I think this is the logical place to doing so. On that basis, I wouldn't be supporting that recommendation.
Councillor Gans, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I've given it serious thought, and first of all, there's two things that weigh heavy with me, and both are the water retention areas. Unless they're given extremely good dress over, they're a harbour for mosquitoes. When you've got young children, not a good move to have in the area. I agree with Councillor Ferrari in the long run. I think we need to consider the distance between Correa Park and the rest of the shopping centre. It's quite a distance. It's for elderly people, it's not walking distance. If you haven't got a driver's licence or somebody to drive you downtown, you're probably not going to walk. So for somewhere to go and relax. And I guess at the end of the day, if we find in a year or 2 or 3's time that the area is not being utilised, it's still not beyond council's capability to sell this block. I'd ask that question to the CEO, is that possible?
Well, thank you for the question, Councillor Vance. It depends on what council resolves. But council could resolve to, to take no further action at this point in time and consider it again at some point in time in the future. Or council could resolve to set it aside for public open space, in which case that would sort of set it in perpetuity. But it depends on what council resolves with it.
I think Madam Mayor, that the CEO didn't quite comprehend my question. My question is, if we set it aside for public space and we find in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time that the block is not being utilised for that purpose, is it still within council's capabilities to change its mind and sell that block for a building site?
Well, yes, it is Councillor Vance, provided the council doesn't set it in perpetuity as public open space. So if if council chose to utilise the area for open space, that decision can be rescinded through the normal method of council.
Thank you. Further contributions to that? I do know hearing, as a mother of many, it is always, and we're very fortunate to have the green areas that we do, and we do have many already in town, but to be able to have those areas like Councillor Easton alluded to, being able to run down the end of the street is a real gift if we're able to provide that for our community, and I think that's been spoken strongly through Councillor Ferrari's response too. So I do hear that and hear that as well. So we will deal with that motion as it stands at the moment. So which is that council, having regard to the demand of suitable residential land, determines that the need for additional public open space has not been established and agrees that lot 5-7 Acacia Court be offered for sale in conjunction with the sale of lands in stages 4 and 5. So now I'll ask all those in favour, all those against, and so that's not carried. So I will now hand over, I just want to make sure I've got this point right, to hand over to Councillor Easton. Did you have a further motion now to put forward to the council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would simply like to put the motion, if I can get a second, put the motion that council retain lot 5-7 Acacia Court as public open space and monitor its use for future discussions.
So set the lot as public open space.
And what was that last little bit?
Monitor its use for future discussion.
And now may I
And
ask for...
point-
Oh, yes, sorry.
Point 2. Taking into account the petition, asking for the land to be in honour of former councillor Michael O'Connor. I would suggest that we accept that recommendation from the community. And that'll work.
Could be named, did you be named in recognition of
Recognition of councillor.
You happy with that? And now may I ask for a seconder for that? And Councillor Ferrari is very happy to second that. And now with that new motion before us, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favour?
Can we
Hang on a
check
second.
especially?
I'm sorry, yes, very much. I'm getting excited. Thank you. Do you like to speak first?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've discussed on a number of things tonight. Being involved with our community, listening to our community, allowing the community to talk to us and tell us what they want us to do. In this instance, I feel the community, as an enclave within our greater community, has a right to their area. They've bought the blocks of land, they understand their needs, they understand what we're offering them. And they've come to us and said, we're not necessarily sure we like what you're doing. They've created a petition, they've told us what they want, and I'm happy to listen to them.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrari, would you like to speak?
I'd just like to reiterate those words by Councillor Easton and just also reiterate that there was a strong feeling from the Corrie Park residents that some sort of recognition could go to Michael O'Connor for his advocacy up in there in relation to Corrie Park, but I think that's something that probably needs some community consultation, but certainly is a strong emphasis by the community up there to have him recognised in some way formally for the work that he did at Corrie Park.
Thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Clark?
I can go first.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillors, it's all, and I don't want to speak against Councillors' will. Councillors' will is very clear, and I understand that. I would, the only thing I would say in that context is that the residents of Corrie Park who have lobbied for this are the beneficiaries of this. This will increase the value of their blocks, and good luck to them. That's the privilege of democracy. I would just counsel my colleagues against kind of making decisions like this on the run, and this really is a decision on the run. Like, we've just pulled it out of the air a bit in that sense of things. I would much prefer, and I'd prefer to vote for something where we actually ask the intention of council is clear, that we ask the officers to go away and actually prepare a report to deal with both of these issues in a more fulsome manner than we're dealing with them tonight. That's all I would say.
Thank you. Councillor Vance?
I would only ask whether or not point 2 puts point 1 in a position of compromise if you're going to come back. It may well not. I just asked the question, that's all. I'm not saying whether I'm in favour of it or against it. But if we're going to come back in 4 or 5 years' time or whenever, when it's dedicated to the name of somebody, that probably takes away council's position somewhat. Yes or no?
Well, councillors, I think the answer to that question lies in the debate on the merits of the motion that's in front of you, and far be it for an officer to actually to weigh into that argument.
Councillor Ferrari?
I'm not convinced that we haven't done it. The petition first came to council on the 15th of April 2019, which is over 12 months ago, so it's probably more towards 18 months ago. So the resolve of the Corrie Park residents certainly hasn't changed. In fact, it's strengthened over that time. So I certainly think we are in a position to make a decision in relation to what should happen with that Block 5 Seven Acacia Court.
Councillor Easton, were you going to talk yet? Or?
No, I won't.
Thank you.
No.
Councillor Vance? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, and again, the point I make is the people of Corrie Park have expressed opinion, but there are people at the other end of town who might want Michael O'Connor recognised at that end of town, or the people up at the high school might want Michael O'Connor recognised. And I don't think it's a public process that we've got a petition from a small group of people that we might Can I move that this matter lay on the table pending a further report from council officers into the options before us?
In regards to the second point, or the
Well,
whole
I think both, because I think we need to understand, as Councillor Vance asked the question, what is the right status for the land? And I think
Yep.
that kind of
What, further discussion?
No, it's a procedural motion.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Matter lay on the
So
table.
do we take a second?
You just, you vote on whether it lay on the table.
Oh, yes, sorry. So do I have a seconder for the lay on the table motion?
I don't think you need a second.
I
It's
don't
a
have a
procedural
seconder.
motion.
Oh, no, good, sorry. That's a bit new.
Yeah.
So very, very happy to do that if we can do that.
Yeah.
we have to vote now.
Sorry, we will need to vote on that though, but we don't need a seconder. So all those in favour to lay it on the table at this stage? And all those against? So that's not carried. So let me keep up with this. So we will now go back to the second motion. So that council retain lot 5-7 Acacia Court as public open space and monitor its use for future discussion. And point 2 of that motion, taking into account the petition that the land be named a recognition of Councillor O'Connor. Is there further discussion on that or amendments to that? No further discussion from anyone. Then we will go back to that motion. And all those in favour of that motion? All those against? Can we abstain on the situation if we're not sure?
You have to vote.
I have to vote. Okay, I will go in favour. Sorry, can I redo that? All those in favour, just to clarify this, to make sure we're doing this clearly. All those against? And that is carried. So thank you for that. Thank you for the clarification points on point of order. And thank you for the discussion on that and the work that's been put into that item. We now move to item 13.11, which is the local roads and community infrastructure projects. And I will hand over again to Mr. Jim Nolan. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from Council about the allocation of funds under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program. Council considered a report on this matter at the June Ordinary Council meeting and resolved to endorse a number of principles that it would use to determine appropriate projects. Those principles are set out in this report. The amount of money that's been provided to Council is $1.39 million, and it is subject to identifying and nominating a number of eligible projects. Subject to those being eligible, then the money will be provided by the Commonwealth. There is a list of projects that have been prepared and presented to Council. Council has worked through these projects in a briefing, and without actually talking about the detail, I will recommend that Council endorse the following projects to be nominated for funding under the Local Road and Community Infrastructure Program, which are as set out in the table, with the exception of the amount provided for the Lexington Community Hub to be $684,921, that the public lighting project be removed from the list, and that the amount provided for footpaths Snake Valley is $150,000, and that the Langy-Calcal Road project be removed from the list. The total of those projects is $1,394,921, and it's recommended that Council endorse those projects for funding under that program.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nolan. And so with those adjustments, may I ask a councillor who's happy to move that? Thank you, Councillor Clark. And seconded, Councillor Eason. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think this is a really good choice of projects in the context of what we've got. Those are the other projects that there are also very, very good. So I've already given Jane a list, but she might not have been able to read and write it. But the other projects are again worthwhile projects, but I think there are other sources of funding. I know Mr. Gowns, we talked about the lighting project, and I certainly, as a CVGA member, I think it's a really important page for council to look at as soon as it can in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said on those. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Reeson, would you like to speak to those?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is one of those amounts of funding that come to us on a very welcome approach, and has to be spent very quickly, has to meet certain criteria as requested by the funding authority. But I also think, as we've spoken of earlier today, we need to let the community know that this is what we're doing. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to try and get this information out to the individual council areas that are benefiting from this money, and what we're going to do for those individual areas, and explaining to them how the money became available for that.
Thank you, Councillor Reeson. Other councillors, would you like to speak to those projects? Have any further discussion? There being none, we'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you for the effort in putting that report together. We now come to the councillor reports and general business part of the meeting, and I will ask Councillor Ferrari, please, to report on the vote order, please, first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like everyone else, the council briefing sessions and previous council meeting, I had a meeting with some stakeholders in relation to the fixed camera at Neil and Lawrence Street. So I'm hoping we're going to get some traction on that. It's something that's been going on for a long while, but it's something that doesn't happen overnight, as we've seen, and it's not going to happen overnight, but if we can just keep plugging away and progressing it, that'll be good. Had some meetings with some residents regarding Corrie Park, BP is 60, regarding the primary school. That's sort of been ongoing a bit, sort of fairly regular things there. Some constituent discussions and some very pleasing discussions with the secondary college and the hands-on learning. I just think those kids up there are fantastic. So that's about it for me.
Thank you so much. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Been a reasonably quiet month, but I've had a couple of, or 3 Zoom meetings in the last 10 days. Timber Town's had their AGM a week before last, where I landed in the Vice President's role. One doesn't know what the future holds, I guess, with council elections coming up, but anyway, I had held that position prior to this meeting also. I got talked into it the year before to help to keep the Timber Towns functioning, but this time they're functioning with a lot more vigour and go. They're really up and going now, and there are a couple of things that come out of our meeting, our general meeting after the AGM, which I think is worth a mention. Vic Forest has been told that they are going to be put out of the forest. There'll be no more harvesting after the year 2030. And as we would be aware, there's been a $25,000 transition funding towards people that are in the industry to transition out. You just imagine if you've got $6 million invested in transport, cutting logs out of forest in East Gippsland, and somebody offers you $25,000 to walk away from your investment, how would it feel? There are 2,000 workers involved in the timber industry in Gippsland alone. The effect of them having to walk away from their livelihood on their families and those smaller towns like Hayfield is catastrophic. So much so that there's a group pushing behind Vic Forest to challenge the decision that the state government have made. They've been told that their decision was based on scientific evidence, and that group have asked the government to make available that scientific evidence, which they've declined to do so. So a group backed by the Wellington Council, I believe, taking the state government to court to challenge them to produce that under freedom of information. So it's a case of watch this space. They've got a QC representing them that was involved with the cattle industry when the federal government banned live exports to Indonesia. This same law firm took the federal government to court and won their case with a $600 million payout to the cattle industry in the Northern Territory in Western Australia. So it may get very interesting before it's finished. I had along with Councillor Eason and the Mayor, we attended a meeting with GWM Water to discuss the water issue for Natty Alec and Moonabel. And I come away feeling quite chuffed from that meeting because Peter Bogans, who's the chair of GWM, suggested that Moonabel was probably one of the best water projects in the country worth pushing ahead with. It's practically shovel ready and it's a project that should be funded. So that gave me some heart that we haven't been banging away on a project that's got a dead end. It might have a future, let's hope so. Last week, on Thursday, we had a strategic planning day for Rural Councils Victoria. And when I went to tap into the Zoom meeting, my computer decided to upload a heap of information, and 20 minutes later, when I tried to get into the meeting, I couldn't get in. So I missed out on the strategic planning day, but the next day I got in. And we had further discussions around planning to go ahead for rural councils, how we might act with the funding that we've had in the past and how we might act if we don't receive that funding from RDB. It's a case of watch this space at the moment because we don't really know, RDB are not forthcoming until the budget comes out, whether we're going to be funded for future projects by the state government. We will go ahead as a standalone group if they don't fund it, but I feel that rural councils have really kicked some goals in the last year or two with projects that they've funded and have been of great assistance to local government. We've got a new local government minister that didn't know that Rural Councils Victoria even existed, so that's the first problem we've got to climb over. We have, unfortunately, due to the bushfires and COVID, lost the services of Taiwan Council with our secretarial services, but we've reappointed, or we have appointed, the agenda group who were our spokespeople. And they had an introduction to all their staff members to us. And I've got to say that I've seen, from a personal point of view, a real benefit already because they have a weekly review that comes to the members of the board so that we have an idea of what's going on back there behind the doors. And Councillor Marianne Brown, who's our chair, has had numerous conversations on the ABC along with Jenny O'Connor, who is the Mayor of Indigo Shire. They are experiencing extreme hardship during this COVID period and the shutdown. They're close to the Murray River. They're in the bushfire zone as well, so Indigo Shire are really copping a hammering. And we were made aware that there was going to be an announcement on Thursday with regards to JobKeeper that the federal government have jumped a couple of days ahead, and that's been announced today, which is good. It's no secret that rural tourism is dying at a rapid rate, and the future of the tourism industry is catastrophic at the moment, especially in Victoria anyway. We seem like we're almost legless, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. That's what we're faced with. Our group are going to try and organise a meeting with Martin Pecula to see whether we can't get the message home that rural councils are really struggling under the current circumstances, especially in the tourism area. And there is a VTEC document available, and I'm very sure that it is a really good strategy and it needs to be pushed hard by all councils if we get the opportunity. That's about my lot. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vance. I might jump over to Councillor Eason. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the Grampians Wimmera meeting, and I also was very pleased with what I heard during that meeting, and hopefully something can come of it, because the farmers along the way, wherever they are, they all need water at some stage. And whether they need it today or whether they need it 12 months from now, hopefully they've got the foresight to think that this is a project that they can support. Attended the AGM of the Arts and Gardens group in Avoca. Saw some new faces come on, which is always pleasing. See people willing to put their hand up and join committees to give a hand and to give a break to someone that's been on the committee for some time and wanting to have a bit of a rest. We had an Activate Avoca meeting as well, which unfortunately showed us the delays that COVID is creating, even in the manufacturing industry. Everything's taking extra time. Things are not happening on the ground because we're simply not able to get it done in time. But we'll get there. It'll take a little bit longer, like a lot of things, but we'll get there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Vance's comments in terms of the loss of native forests to us. I think in the future I would fully support that bit of work. I just think it's a really silly thing for us, for a really nice little local industry that really, yes, it does use the forest product, and it's about politics, it's not about practicality, unfortunately, in this case. Over the last month I've been continuing my CBJ and my Highlands Land responsibilities on behalf of Council, and everything's been virtual, so it's been very relaxing, which I like. I've had a number of constituent issues, both in the planning and local law sense, and Mr. Gowns, if you could pass on to your officers, they only get to me when they're really tricky and messy, and I appreciate the diligence of the officers in working through these things. They're not things that are quick fixes, and I fully recognise that in the sense of things. We've also had what should be our final meeting of the Raglan Flood Study Group before this comes to Council, probably in August. There's nothing really major that we need to do in Raglan at this point in time, but there's some opportunities, I think, when we're doing roadworks in the future and things like that, that we will look at in due course. And finally, some ongoing budget and rating discussions around my own constituents, and good outcome tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those reports around the Shire and Mount Emu Ward with the, I guess, still top of the agenda as it has been in all areas is the dealing with COVID and how we're still protecting those vulnerable members of our community. One thing though that I'm just seeing, which is so heartening, is people really reaching out via social media, and all members of the community, especially in the Snake Valley area community, seem to be utilising that and really supporting each other. So there's been a lot of activity on that. From a mayoral position, still trying to get good messages out there and working on that has been another focus this month. It's great to see opportunities of sport being able to return, at least in the interim, although we did have an air ambulance incident at the Carnham Rec Reserve, but all was well, and so that was well handled and a bit dramatic though again for the community, but it's exciting that people can at least start to come together to support each other. I think a big thing out of this, and was brought up in discussions today we had, but really caring for the mental health of our constituents and all of you out there watching this via video. It's so important, and that's really at the top of our agenda and the top of everyone's agenda to make sure that we can all work through this, and we really can, and we're really trying to plug that Pyrenees community can, and we will. I think too, in our area, people will be seeing that the wind farm is still definitely moving ahead, and Councillor Clark had alluded to that too. It's as soon as the sun shines, or even when the sun's not shining at night time, they're still working hard away at that, the workers there, so definitely taking shape. It was a few weeks ago now that Councillor Clark and I had the opportunity to be at the Telstra Mobile Cell opportunity. I think that's been brilliant, and now we've also seen Optus Tower starting up as well. So we're hoping that's support for our community there in that area that now we will try to cover as much as we can of that area. But again, I guess finish on just thank you all, and thank you those people listening for the great community support that you are showing to each other. Again, there's just been awesome things happening. Two other quick things that have happened in our area. There's a craft group just starting up, and people are already discussing online what they're going to do and how they're going to be able to come together when they're able to. And there was a great incident just the other week where a group of community members, social distancing, but got together and cleaned up a whole a lane called Hope's Lane just out of Snake Valley. It's quite a long road, but they have got together to collect rubbish that had started to appear again with people moving around. We do ask people, please don't litter our area, but this showed great pride in our area, and they were just so inspiring. And people that continue to do that, I know that people do that in little ways. I know even walking along my road when we do that pickup, it's because we love our area and we want to protect it. So thank you to all those that do that on an everyday basis, and that was just a great little example from our part of the world. So thank you those that are listening. We are going to move a motion very shortly to move into closed council, and we will thus then stop the videoing at that time. So now we'll ask for a councillor to move into closed council. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Seconded, Councillor Ferrari. All those in favour, and that is